Guten Abend zum zweiten Friedhofstalk, respektive Sommertalk aus dem Friedhof Sihlfeld. Und Friedhofsforum ist der Organisator und wir reden heute wieder in der Reihe, und da wir nicht gestorben sind, über das Sterben. Und zwar reden wir heute über das Sterben der Sterne, nachdem wir das letzte Mal mit dem Christian J. Jenny über das Sterben auf der Bühne geredet haben, über das Sterben auf der Politbühne auch, reden wir heute über das Universum, über Galaxien. Und es nimmt mich natürlich Wunder, wie sterben Sterne und wie funktioniert das eigentlich? Und bei mir ist der Ben Moore weltberühmt für seine Talks, als Universalgelehrter, natürlich als Astrophysiker. Er ist Professor an der Uni Zürich, sozusagen Einstein sein Nachfolger. Herzlich willkommen, Ben Moore.
Thank you, Monica. Pleasure to talk to you.
And we're going to switch to English now. Ben, if I look up on the sky, I mean, I don't see any stars at the moment, but if I would look up there, I don't really, I mean, I see something, but I don't see behind what's up there. What do you see when you sit on your Mayans ass in Davos, where you mainly live, and look up on the universe, on the sky?
I'm sure I see the same as you, Monica. You see the beauty of the universe. What goes through my mind is also probably a lot of astrophysics as well, because I can recognize some stars that are blue supergiants that are hundreds of times larger than our sun, and some stars that are far older than our sun. I guess the most amazing thing that comes to my mind is the recent discovery in the last decade or so is that almost every star we look at has its own planets orbiting it. And this to me is the most incredible discovery of the recent history.
But when you look up there, I mean, you can't see it with your eyes, really. I mean, you have to use some technique to see it. What do you have on your Mayan's ass to really look up there and see some things?
My imagination, but I also have a couple of telescopes, actually, quite nice Japanese telescopes for taking deep images of objects you can't see with your eye. So this is a little hobby of mine, and astrophotography and astronomy, and one that I've started teaching to the students at the university now.
And tell me about, I mean, are these stars all alive? Could we call them alive, or what would you call them?
It depends on your definition of living thing, or what, something can change form, it can transform, or something can be disrupted and end its current state, and then we would call it dead. And in astronomy or astrophysics, a star is a star, but it can die, it can end its life. We call this, when a massive star explodes as a supernova, we would say that's the end of the star, it died. It stopped its current state, it blows itself to pieces and might collapse into a black hole. So it becomes a new object, it transforms, but it ends its state. So it's a sort of different view of death that we might think of when we talk about the death of living things.
So it's more a transformation, actually.
Yeah, but that's true of all forms of matter, even ourselves. When we die, our particles just get transformed into new states.
And can you tell me a little bit more what exactly happens in that moment when they transform? I mean, the material is falling apart, is transforming, of course, but maybe for me as someone who doesn't know about it.
With stars, it's quite beautiful. There's just 4 relatively simple equations that describe the life and death of stars, and we know more about how stars work than how humans work, obviously. But a star, its life depends on its mass. Simple as that. So a small star, or some of the smallest stars, the red dwarf stars, will shine for 1 trillion years, and they just fade out. What happens is in the center of the star, where the energy is coming from nuclear fusion, as hydrogen fuses together to form helium, some of the mass of those hydrogen nuclei is transformed into energy. That's the energy of a star. And eventually that will stop when all the hydrogen in the core is used up. And it just sits there as a cold, dying object. A star like the sun, that's a bit more interesting. Hydrogen will fuse to form helium, then helium will fuse to form carbon. maybe a bit of oxygen will be formed from as two carbon nuclei come together. And that's about it in stars like our sun. And in about 7 billion years, our sun will stop this process. It's converted all of the inner fuel into heavier atoms, and there's no more energy left. The center will cool down a bit, the outsides will expand, and our star will become a red giant star. And then eventually it will blow away its outer envelope as a beautiful planetary nebula. If you've seen the Hubble Space Telescope images, a lot of those images are the death of stars like our sun. Beautiful planetary nebula.
And is there also, I mean, there's also a birth then of stars.
Everything has an origin and an end. It took a few hundred years to get to the origin of stars, but this was figured out in the last century. It comes basically from a theory from the French scientist Laplace, who in a couple of hundred years ago realized that if you start off with a big cloud of atoms of gas and it can collapse under its own gravity, it will eventually form a star and some planets. And that's what the modern theory of star and planet formation is based on.
I mean, you study this for many years, you teach it. What's for you so interesting to go so far for things to understand? What is it? What is the fascination of it?
I think space and the universe inspires people and it inspires students. And you can learn a lot of basic physics, mathematics from applying it to our universe. And it's a great way of encouraging students to learn more about those hard subjects, because you have to learn general relativity, quantum mechanics, and electrodynamics, and all these subjects to actually understand the life and death of a star. So it brings students into these difficult areas, motivates them to learn more about science.
And your personal relationship with stars? Or, I mean, are you sad if a star dies? To ask you that personal question.
I would love to see a supernova. This is the end state of the most massive stars, when the center stops its energy source, collapses in a fraction of a second into a black hole, and then the outer shells of the star explode away into space. And these happen every 100 years or so. There could be one nearby in the next 10 years, or maybe the next 10,000 years. We don't know, because you can't predict exactly when a star will die.
So we don't know the time. Have a sip of your glass. I think that's important. So we don't know the exact date of a star to die.
You can, looking at the equations, you can calculate to within a certain error when a star will die. So we know the sun will die in 7.2 billion years, plus or minus about 50 million years. But that 50 million years is the error, given the uncertainty. So you can't say exactly when.
How will this place look like when the sun dies? Of course, it's not going to be existing. Oh.
You know, that's a long time. In about 100 million years, the African continent will lie on top of us here. So we'll look quite different on this, on a short time scale compared to the time scale of stars.
You know, there's this childish question, of course, I'm sure you have been asked before. I mean, where does this material go when it transforms and dies? And I mean, it's the question about where's the end? Where's it all? Where are we within? I mean, that's, I guess, the philosophical question nobody really knows, right?
No, we unfortunately we do know. It's at least to some uncertainty, but given
To
what
a border?
are we talking about the end of the universe now?
Yeah.
Everything comes to an end, doesn't it? And that's true of the universe. And eventually all the stars will stop shining, because there's only a finite amount of atoms that can gather together to form stars, and that most of the stars in our galaxy have already formed. There's only a small fraction that will form in the future. And in about 1 trillion years, the last star will stop shining and our galaxy will become completely black.
And that's it.
No.
Is that the end? Are we talking of the end?
No, that's not the end. There's a lot of dead stars then orbiting in our galaxy, and this will continue for another about 10 to the 19 years until the galaxy itself basically evaporates into nothingness, and all these dead planets and dead remnants of stars will be ejected into empty space, and then this, the vacuum energy will take them away, and there's nothing really left then after about 10 to the 20 years or so, apart from the black hole at the center of our galaxy. That'll still be there.
So Ben, tell me, what does this teach you for your own life or for our human being lives on this planet, when you know everything about the stars and the galaxies and the planets?
It just reinforces what we all know, that is, nothing lasts forever. That's true of the universe. In terms of life, life began on our planet about 4 billion years ago, and already in 1 billion years from now, the temperature on the surface will be so hot there will be no oceans and no atmosphere, because the sun evolves in time. As it heads towards its death, the Earth will be getting really hot. And this is not global warming, this is a longer time scale effect. But in about 1 billion years, our planet will be uninhabitable. So life is very temporary, even on our own world. And if by some miracle we can survive the next 100 years, then there's no problem. There are plenty of planets out there that we could go and live on. But eventually there'll be no more stars, no more planets, and all life will come to an end. And this just teaches you, reinforces that everything is temporary, and there's no real purpose to all of this. So really just make the most of everything you have.
So listening to you, it sounds like we are taking us definitely too serious ourselves, too serious in our time of being here.
I don't know. Do you take yourself
I
seriously?
Well, of course I do. Like probably everybody does. We have our thoughts and wishes and dreams and are sad about things. And
that's true. We worry too much about pathetic little things that we shouldn't worry about. And like our taxes, this worries me because it's a pain.
So, but that helps you looking up to the universe and the cosmos and thinking about.
It's a nice distraction from our everyday problems. But our everyday problems are usually small. Not always. Some people have big problems.
Compared to what's out there.
Yeah, it gives you a perspective, that's all.
But, we also have this thought of, we have memories, we have a soul maybe, we think we do have something remains, a spirit maybe.
Is that the royal we? Is that you?
No, yeah, well, I'm just sort of quoting, maybe. So this is for a scientist like you that doesn't exist, can't exist.
We all. Do we need to go there? Okay, we do. You asked. It's interesting because the oldest written texts we have, going back to the Sumerians, they wrote wonderful text stories written on stone tablets 4,000 years ago, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's a beautiful story about the afterlife, and even before that, humans were building monuments to their dead, and so death has played a role in our history, a big one, and people have in the past always brought up the idea that there is more than there is evidence for. And it's natural. I would 4,000 years ago, standing outside in a relatively primitive society, I would be scared by the world and the universe. I would think there would be gods and an afterlife gives you hope. But today, I think the harder path is to take to look at the evidence, and there's no evidence for anything more than there is. And in my eyes, what I see from the evidence is that when we die, we're dead, and our atoms go back into the ground. They'll become part of new life in the future. But that's
Which is
quite
beautiful
hard.
in a way, as a
It's
picture.
nice, but there's nothing else. That's it. And I would much prefer there to be an afterlife, so I could live happily forever. So it's harder not to believe in an afterlife, I think.
But you were talking about your dog before we sat down here, and you said your dog is sort of, is it, would you call him fortunate not to know that he's dying, or would you call him
I
that
think
he has a loss in a way?
no, I think that's the one thing that distinguishes us from most animals is that we realize we're going to die. It's there. It grows as you grow older. This knowledge that we're going to die becomes a burden. And my dog Bertie, the Labradoodle, he wakes up every morning. Yay! It's a new day. Let's play frisbee, and he's going to do this until the day he dies without ever worrying about it. So it's I wish I was Bertie sometimes.
Bertie. Ben, maybe I'm asking stupid questions about this universe, but what I'm interested in is also what do you think? I mean, you were talking about that looking up there started a lot of thinking for human beings. I mean, and also religions and philosophical thoughts and it opened up a space. So the stars are very, actually, so far away they're very close to us. Are we sort of more connected to them than we probably think we are?
Well, early in human history, the stars were signals in the sky. The stars were omens from the gods, and the Babylonians, Egyptians, they had priests and astronomers dedicated to mapping the heavens, looking out for eclipses, and they had advanced mathematics to predict when eclipses would occur. But it was all just to look for omens when you might die or the king might die. And this lasted for a long time in human history until eventually in ancient Greece, they started to try to understand the heavens and the stars and the planets without invoking gods. So until the time of the ancient Greeks, it was the gods that moved the planets, and the stars were fixed in space. And then ideas started to come, and eventually we get to the time of Isaac Newton and Galileo and these scientists that worked out the mechanism by which planets move and what the stars were. And this began science, really. It was looking at the stars and the planets started our path to where we are today.
When you were a little boy, what was the clinging to this universe that made you study astrophysics? What was it? What you wanted to know or find out?
Well, that was my father's influence.
You followed his footpath.
He was a forester, and he was just asking questions. And this is something I encourage my students always to do: is just ask questions. And he would ask. We would talk about how trees lived and died. We would talk about the sun, how it shone, and quantum mechanics. He was fascinated, and he wanted me to go to university to answer some of these questions, which I managed to do a few of them, but still working on most of them.
What are the questions you really want to, I mean, what is the main goal which you still think, God, this universe has so many questions I haven't answered yet?
Oh, there's too many. I think we know next to nothing about our universe. We've come a long way, but there's a long way to go. And to get to a real deep understanding of space, time, matter, and energy, and it all gets very hard and mathematical, and you end up with, you get to quantum field theory, which describes everything around us. It's the most fundamental theory we have that works, and it's just mathematics. So that our current understanding of our universe is purely mathematical. Can't give you a physical, intuitive description of what you are, apart from saying that you're just an energy field. You're a manifestation of an energy field that will be transformed into a different energy field in the future, which is amazing. But get your head around that for a minute.
So it's actually a continuous journey, more or less. you're on.
I think to really understand what we are, what particles are, what the universe is, why it is here. Ask me in 10,000 years.
I will. Are you coming back to
Yeah,
this place?
I hope so.
Good. I heard
But I
you.
doubt it.
10,000 years, Ben Moore and myself here am Friedhofsforum. Das war der Talk. Merci vielmals. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
being here.
Monika.
Und wir haben noch einen am Donnerstag, und zwar mit der Petra Ivanov. Und dann reden wir über das Sterben in Krimis und wie man Figuren sterben, wenn man darüber schreibt. Wir wünschen euch einen schönen Abend und schauen an die Sterne rauf und denken an das, was der Ben Moore alles erzählt hat.